My parents excluded me from our Christmas family postcard, saying my wheelchair would ruin the photo, but included my adopted brother instead, leaving me heartbroken. I, 17, female, have a younger brother, Nathan, 15, male. And I always had this feeling that my parents preferred him over me. Nathan is adopted. My parents adopted him around 9 years ago, but he fits right in with our family. In fact, I would even say that he looks more like a part of my family and like the kind of child that my parents should have than I do. I'm not saying this because I want to, but because my parents have joked about this several times. I feel like they really don't mean it as a joke. My family is really conventionally attractive, and I'm not even kidding. They could be on the cover of some family magazine. I, unfortunately, don't really fit in. I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes as a kid, and that made it very difficult for me to lose weight. My parents tried to control my portions, and whatever I consumed was strictly monitored by them. But that's no way to live, and I used to literally have to eat in secret because it genuinely felt like they were starving me. It was already very difficult for me to maintain a healthy weight, and because of my irregular eating habits, it became impossible for me to lose weight. And I'm going to be honest, I'm quite overweight now. Then, around 6 months ago, I was unfortunately diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and for the past 3 months, I have been forced to intermittently use a wheelchair because the symptoms are so severe and I have flare-ups quite frequently. But I don't really know what the reason for that is yet, so I can't even prevent that from happening. Life had already been pretty difficult for me earlier, since I had been an introverted kid, and even at home, the way I was treated was not exactly ideal. But now, after my diagnosis, things have taken a turn for the worse. Earlier, I was just overweight, but now, I'm that fat kid in a wheelchair. I was struggling mentally, and my parents did not do anything to help me improve my situation. Instead, they started making it even worse for me, because, from their behavior, it was pretty apparent that they considered me a burden on their family. So, I just started restricting myself to my room as much as I could, because I really did not want to bother them, and it is incredibly lonely, but I can't help it. I really don't want to feel like I'm constantly disappointing everyone around me. I always kept feeling like they didn't really want me as part of their family, but I would deal with it by shaking these thoughts off. However, after the incident that took place a couple of weeks ago, it became much more difficult to just do that. Almost 3 weeks back, my parents were discussing the Christmas postcard that we send out every year to the rest of the family, and the next day, like every year, I got dressed in the red outfit and went to the living room, so I could be a part of the family photograph. It's been a ritual for years, and I thought that even though everything had changed, at least this would remain constant, and I would still continue to feel like part of my own family. But they took that away from me as well. As soon as they saw me, they got really awkward and said that they had thought that maybe this time it would only be the three of them because I was in a wheelchair that day, and they didn't want to spoil their photograph. I was shocked that they would even say something like that, but I tried to bargain with them. I said that I would try to stand for a couple of pictures, and it really wouldn't be that bad for me, but they insisted that I should stay in the wheelchair and just let them take the photos. That made it very obvious to me that they did not want me in the picture anyway, in the most literal sense of the phrase. So, I went back to my room and cried myself to sleep, and the worst part was that nobody even came by to check on me. It was a horrible day towards the end of a horrible year, and I just couldn't bear it. So, that day, I finally called my grandmother up and told her everything that was going on. My grandma is my dad's mother, and she's a wonderful person. My grandpa passed away when my dad was just 10 years old, and since then, she has built a life for herself from scratch. She's really strong and inspirational, and she loves me more than anyone else. I would have gone to live with her, but I was really holding out on the fact that at some point, my parents would probably change and treat me better. But that day, I realized that it was never going to happen. My grandmother knew that my parents didn't exactly treat me well, and several times she had asked me to move in with her if I wanted to. And that day, I told her that I really wanted to go away. I wanted to leave this house and live with her, because clearly I was not wanted here. I had known that for a really long time, but I had still been fighting with myself, trying not to believe it, because at the end of the day, they were still my parents, and this was my family. But if this was my family, I was probably better off without one. She was the one who was there for me that day. She calmed me down and comforted me on the phone while I continued to sob. She also told me that she would be there in a couple of days, as soon as she was back from her cruise with her friends, and then she would take me away with her. Yeah, my grandma has a pretty cool lifestyle. Anyway, I made her promise that she would take me away, and after that, I did not say anything to my parents because I had realized that it was not worth it. They did not even bother to apologize to me after that particular incident for excluding me from the photograph. They pretended like everything was normal, and so did I, because I knew that I was going to be rescued from this place soon enough. And my grandmother, true to her word, showed up at our place last week. For 7 entire days, I had barely spoken to my parents or Nathan. All I did was go to school, come back home, and then stay in my room for the rest of the day. But on the day that my grandmother visited, I was the one to open the door to her and invite her in. My parents did not have a clue about what was going to happen, so they seemed pretty relaxed to have her around and were acting as if everything was normal. But my grandmother was having none of it, so she asked them why exactly I hadn't been included in the Christmas postcard as soon as she was seated. The postcards hadn't even been sent out yet, so my parents were really confused as to how she found out. But then they figured out that I must have told her about that incident. And instead of acting apologetic for it, they turned to me and rolled their eyes at me, saying that I had no reason to make a big deal out of it and complain to my grandmother about that. They offered the same explanation once again. They did not want to bother me by having me stand up for the picture, and if I had my wheelchair in the photo, it would spoil the photograph. So far, I hadn't said anything, but then I took the opportunity to point out that I had told them that I was fine with standing up for a couple of minutes, but they were the ones who had refused. And that obviously meant that they really did not want me in the picture. I pointed out that they had always treated me like an outsider in my family because I did not fit in with them, even though that was not even my fault. I told them that it was ironic that even though Nathan was adopted, they treated him more like somebody who was actually their flesh and blood, as opposed to me. They only considered me a burden. Even though Nathan and I used to be close when we were children, he had observed the way that our parents treated me and had chosen to distance himself from me as well. So in the end, I was left with absolutely no one in this household. At least then, Nathan had the good sense to look away, because he knew whatever I was saying was true. My parents got mad at me instantly for saying that Nathan was adopted, as if he didn't know. Obviously, he was aware of it because he was 6 years old when he came into our family, and I had never thought of him less as my brother, just because he was not biologically related to me. But my point was still true, that he always received the treatment that I didn't, not because he looked more like my parents' kid and I did not. And maybe I had kind of started resenting all of them a little bit because of how I was being treated. Even then, my parents did not take the opportunity to apologize, or even act like they were sorry. They just said that I was acting spoiled, and I was being nasty by bringing up the fact that Nathan was adopted just to justify my behavior. They even went on to say that they expected an apology from me now. I was about to argue even more, but I guess my grandma had had enough by that point. She intervened and said that there was no need for that. She was here to prevent exactly this kind of mistreatment from taking place anymore. My parents looked confused, so she told them that she was taking me off their hands since they had never bothered to hide the fact that they considered me a burden on the family. I was turning 18 in a couple of months, so there was no real need to bother with custody and whatever. I could just go live with her, and it would be completely fine. My parents seemed shocked for a couple of minutes. Nobody said anything, but then they said that if my grandmother really wanted to take me with her, then she was free to do so. They were not going to stop me. They didn't even put up a fight, and it just proved all my theories to be true. They really didn't want me to be a part of the family. With me gone, it would just be my parents and Nathan, and then they could finally have the picture-perfect family that they had always wanted. When my parents said that they were fine with my grandmother taking me away, I thought that we were going to leave immediately, but my grandmother just smiled and said that they had acted exactly the way she had expected them to, and then she brought out some papers. She said that she should have done this a long time back and told my parents that she was cutting them out of her will, and now, after she passed away, everything that she had would go to me and Nathan. At first, I did not realize the implications of this, but I guess my parents did because they immediately flew into defense mode and said that it was incredibly unfair for her to treat them like that just because I was bratty and entitled. I guess I hadn't really thought about it, but my grandmother was pretty wealthy since she was one of the top real estate agents before she retired a couple of years back, so it would make sense for her to have a lot of money. And I hadn't really thought about it because I love my grandmother for who she is, not because of her money, unlike my parents. Anyway, then she told my parents that she would not be leaving anything to them and even showed them the paperwork for it. They started bawling and said that she was being horrible and that she just couldn't do this to them, but my grandmother literally did not care. She just told me to go back to my room, pack everything that I needed, and then come along with her. Thankfully, I had pretty much kept everything packed since I had a week to prepare for this, and I only had to drag everything out. Even when I was doing that, my parents just kept crying, begging, and bargaining with my grandmother, but she just ignored them. Nathan did not say anything. He just sat quietly in a corner, trying to disappear from the room itself. While I was leaving, he was the only person who bothered to say goodbye to me, and my parents were too busy trying to argue with my grandma to even notice that I was also leaving. Soon enough, we had driven away, and since then, I have been living with my grandma. Her place is a lot closer to my school as well, so I get to sleep in a lot longer since I don't have to wake up early for the bus, and I can just walk to school. I feel like I should have switched to living with her earlier than I did, but at least it's better late than never. My parents have not bothered to contact me since I left, but Nathan sent me a text soon after. He acknowledged the fact that I had never treated him badly, but he had actually distanced himself from me, and maybe unknowingly, he had allowed the way our parents treated me to influence his behavior towards me as well. He hadn't even realized it until I had brought it up, but now that he knew about it, he wanted to make it up to me by apologizing. He said that he was really and truly very grateful for this family, because had it not been for us, he probably still would have been stuck with his biological parents and had a much worse life. He was not just thankful to my parents for adopting him, but also to me for always treating him like my own brother, and to my grandmother as well. Nathan told me that he wanted to have a fresh start with me, and so we have been hanging out at school, so we can repair our relationship. It's been a bit weird for the past couple of years. Ever since he turned 13, he had been very distant from me, but now I feel like I'm slowly getting back to the old Nathan who used to put me on a pedestal. Anyway, this is not about that. It's just that he said something to me in passing yesterday while we were hanging out that really stayed with me. While talking, I just happened to ask what was going on at home because I couldn't resist wanting to know what my parents were up to. Nathan told me that the situation at home was not looking too good because apparently the blame game between my parents had started already. My mom was blaming my dad for pushing me away my entire life, and even for the incident that took place the other day, because apparently it had been his idea not to include me in the picture. My dad blamed her for making me feel like I was a burden, because most of the time, it was my mother who would overreact, and it felt as though having me as a child was the toughest job in the world for her. Nathan told me that at the rate that things were going, he's afraid that they might file for a divorce, and he mentioned it to me very casually, but I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since then. And I know that it's very stupid of me to think about it and even consider this possibility, but it's just that I started feeling like if they get divorced, it might be my fault. It might be because I overreacted, because maybe they genuinely did not mean to make me feel like a burden or whatever. They probably did not even intend to offend me on the day of the photo shoot, but I took it to heart. I honestly don't know what to think, but I know for a fact that I will be very upset if my parents decide to get divorced. No matter what is going on with me and them right now, I feel like an idiot and a doormat for even considering these things, but I can't help it. It's just what's going on in my head. And I have tried everything to push it out of my mind, but I just can't do it. So that's why I'm here, since I feel like I need reassurance right now. and there's no better place to seek that unbiased and objective opinion than Reddit. So, Aita, if we're getting offended that my parents didn't want me in the family photo for our Christmas postcard and telling my grandmother about it, edit. Okay, so just to clear up a couple of things, my grandmother changed her will and left everything to me and Nathan because our parents had screwed up, but Nathan had not. I will admit that the way he had been behaving with me had not exactly been nice. But again, he's just a kid, so am I. He's not even close to 18, and I think he deserves a chance to redeem himself. Both my grandmother and I believe that he does not deserve to be punished and pushed away by his family because of what our parents did. If we act the same way, there's literally no difference between us and my parents. So I think it was pretty fair for my grandmother to include Nathan in the will as well. And as for people who were asking about his birth parents, his mom was around 19 when she had him and had to drop out of college for that. And the cherry on top, she was struggling with substance abuse too. Nathan's father, unfortunately, took off a couple of months after he was born and came back into his life intermittently. My parents knew Nathan's biological mother's cousin since they went to college together, which is how my parents were able to find out about Nathan. Nathan's maternal grandparents had tried to give their daughter several chances to clean up her act and be a good mother to him, but she just couldn't do it. So when Nathan turned 6, his grandparents decided to talk their daughter into giving him up for adoption because not only was she ruining her life, but she was also spoiling his future. And my parents, coincidentally, had been thinking about adopting a second child because they wanted another kid. But my mother's first pregnancy had been pretty complicated, and she did not want to take the risk a second time. So Nathan's aunt spoke to my parents, and they fostered Nathan for a while before officially adopting him. His grandparents have stayed in touch with him, and he meets them every month. But he has never met his parents after he got adopted. His mother claims that it's been hard for her to see him again, and his dad has just disappeared from his life entirely. Ever since then, he has been my brother. There has been no debate about it. I might have brought up the fact that he was adopted, and I kind of feel guilty about it. I shouldn't have done that. But I was just very frustrated, and in the heat of the moment, I kind of lost the plot. But I have apologized to him for it since then, and we are trying to get back on good terms because I really don't want to lose him. We lost each other for a couple of years because of our parents, but we are not going to let it happen again. In fact, I have even told him that if things get too hard for him back at home because of how much our parents are fighting, he's welcome to come and live with me and our grandmother. Update 1. Hello. Thank you so much for all the comments, and thank you so much for all the support that you guys have shown me. It's been a bit overwhelming for me to deal with it, but it makes me feel better to know that there have been a lot of people who have been in a similar kind of position because I was feeling really alone before this. However, knowing that you guys have made it through gives me hope. I took the suggestion that most of you guys had. I spoke to my grandmother about what I was feeling, like I was responsible for my parents fighting, and she, like everyone else, told me that I had nothing to feel sorry about. I had finally taken a stand for myself after years of tolerating the way they had mistreated me. There was nothing wrong with that. I had done literally everything in my power to make them realize what I was worth. I had put up with them for so many years and tried to assimilate myself into their family, but they kept rejecting me and pushing me away again and again. And now that they did not have anybody to blame, they had turned on each other instead. And that's really not my fault. I don't need to beat myself up about it. And that's true. I guess right now my parents don't have anybody to blame in the household, and they don't want to take it out on Nathan. So they are taking out all their anger and frustration on each other. If they get divorced, it'll be very sad, but it's not going to be my problem. And if they decide to stay together, that's still better for them. Whatever happens, I'm going to stay out of it. I have spoken to Nathan about this as well, and he told me that he had just told me what was going on at home because I had asked. But he did not intend to make me feel guilty about it. And I know that, so I told him that it was not his fault anyway. But I just wanted him to know that if he wants, then he can come and live with me, because I know that he might end up blaming himself as well. And I don't want that for him. He told me he would think about it, but right now, he would prefer to stay with our parents because he still owes them this much. And I kind of understand where he's coming from, so I have no grudges against him. We have promised each other that no matter what happens with the rest of the family, we are not going to allow that to turn us against each other. And I'm really hoping that we are able to stick to that. Update too high. So my parents came to visit me today. And when I came back home from school, they were here, sitting in the living room with my grandmother. As soon as I walked in, she told me that they were there to talk to me. But I was in no mood to talk to them since I had a pretty crappy day at school as well. So I told them that whatever it was that they had to say, they could put it in an email, or they could come by later because I was really exhausted and I just needed to take a nap. But they told me that they had specifically taken time off from work to talk to me because they wanted to take me back with them. I would be leaving for college in a couple of months, so they wanted to spend the last couple of months before I left with me. They said that they were there to apologize if I had felt offended by their behavior. Now people can say that I have been nitpicking, but I really don't like the way that they phrased it. Because what does it even mean to say that they were sorry that I felt offended by their behavior? Their behavior was offensive. That's why I felt offended. I knew that I had been doubting myself for a couple of days, but circumstances have changed now. I know that everyone agrees that what they did and the way they treated me was unacceptable, so I told them that the only reason I had been so upset was because the way they treated me was not right. I was offended because what they had done was offensive. There was no question of an if situation arising, but instead of taking that in their stride and correcting themselves, they told me that even I had been very distant from them. So of course, they had no idea what I was going through. It just made me realize that no matter how hard I tried, or how hard anyone tried, my parents were beyond apologies. I told them to leave because I knew that they were just going to try and gaslight me further into believing that this was all my fault, and eventually get me to apologize to them instead. I wanted to save myself the trouble, so I just told them to leave. But they refused to even get up and said that they were not going anywhere until I had sat down and dignified everything with a discussion, because they deserve that at the very least, especially after everything that they had done for me, which just meant normal things that every parent does. I didn't even want to argue. I just rolled my eyes and started to go back to my room. Then my dad yelled at me and said that I was not allowed to leave without talking to them. Thankfully, my grandmother was right there, and she was not going to let this kind of behavior fly in her house. So she told my dad to keep his mouth shut and his voice low, because after the way he treated me, he had no right to scream at me just because I had made the right choice for myself and left them. She instructed my father to apologize to me and said that if I did not want to speak to him, there was nothing that she could do, and that they had to leave because she was not going to allow them to mentally harass me again and again just because they were worried about their reputation and their image. They were obviously only here to get me back with them, as they were worried about what people would think if they discovered that I had moved out and was living with my grandma. But I didn't care. I had my own future to look out for. My parents tried to speak to me again, but I just told them to leave me alone because everything was still too fresh and I was not going to move on anytime soon. So eventually, they had to leave because my grandma was not going to allow them to stay much longer. After they left, she asked me if I wanted to see them again, and I told her that for a while my answer would be no. So the next time that they try to visit, my grandma is not going to invite them in. I spoke to Nathan about their visit as well, and he told me that he had no idea. They just came back home a couple of hours ago. They looked very disappointed, and nobody had even come out of their rooms in a while. I guess it's pretty depressing for him, but I can't help it. It is what it is. Update 3. Hello, folks! So I'm leaving for college in a week. I got into my first choice, and I'm really looking forward to my future now. It's going to be very difficult being on my own, but my grandmother has made all the arrangements prior to the move, and she's going to stay with me and help me settle into my apartment for the first couple of weeks. My parents and I have not spoken for the last couple of months, and my mental health has improved considerably. I'm no longer breaking down randomly during the day, so I guess staying away from them has had its benefits. Nathan has told me that things have pretty much gone back to normal in the household, and I guess they're also not any worse off without me, which makes me feel a little bad. But I'm happy for Nathan. We have obviously kept in touch, and we're going to try and get on at least once every week. I'm going to miss my life here, but I'm excited for the future. Thanks for checking in on me.